Okay, can I move to funding for third and fourth level institutions? Sure. And if I can start with Institutes of Technology and the ones that I'm most familiar with, which would be Waterford and Carlow. In 2008, the core grant for WIT was €40,134,565. In 2016, the core grant was €26,460, which is a very substantial cut in core funding over that time period. The level of student activity has remained static, so the same level of enrolment is there, but the funding was cut from 40 million essentially to 26 million. So can you first of all talk to us on the funding for Institutes of Technology, and also in relation to Institutes of Technology, your understanding of the percentage of pay as against core funding?
Yeah,
is that a problem?
First, on the issue of the decrease in expenditure by the state, a certain amount of that decrease in expenditure was balanced upwards by the increase in the student contribution. So it's not that the absolute decrease isn't as absolute as I understand as what you have set out. So you're talking about the core grant that has there is now increased student contribution. That is not to deny a significant decrease in the funding of higher education. We understand that this is a difficulty and a challenge. We obviously had to reduce expenditure during the difficult times.
Well, I can correct you on that first of all, because the fees in 2008 for WIT were 10,203,000. The fees in 2016 were 6 million. The total funding in 2016 was 32 million in WIT. In 2008 was 50 million. So what you've just said certainly didn't happen in.
Yeah, well, we did. It is true that we have increased student contributions over the past 10 years to a level of €3,000 a year now. It is also true that a high proportion of those students, higher in the IT sector than in the universities, are funded for those grants, are given grants to pay those fees by SUSI.
And how much, can you tell me, do you know from knowledge, because there would have been several PQs tabled on this, what the percentage of pay is as opposed to core funding in institutes generally? Or I can give you the Waterford figure, which is 87%. Would that not be something that would trouble you as a Secretary General, that there would be such a high level of the core funding goes towards pay, even though it is obviously staff heavy in terms of an institution, obviously?
Well,
but would 87% be concerning to you?
We are concerned. Well, clearly, people are the business of higher education institutions, and pay levels for people are a key part of running an institution. WIT is slightly above its ECF. We have an ECF number for each institution. WIT, from what I recall, is about 4 or 5 staff members above their ECF level. So we would be concerned that they are slightly above their ECF level. But that is an issue, a small issue for WIT, but there is an issue.
But they also run deficits. So there's a number of institutes of technology that are running a deficit, and Waterford is one of them as well.
And the HEA undertook an exercise to look at the funding of institutes of technology more generally, and we've
and on that, can you just give me a rundown of what the funding streams would be for institutes of technology? So we know that there is a core grant, and we know there is the fees. So there's two, which would be the big ones. So what other forms of income would institutes of technology have at their disposal?
Well, they would have research funding. They could apply for competitive research funding, whether it was
research funding,
nationally or
one.
internationally.
And what else would there be?
They would obviously have philanthropy as an option to seek that. They could have income arising from their investments. So, for example, in the case of WIT, the Manor Village complex gives some income to the institution.
And what else? Would there be other income streams?
Yeah, obviously international students as well, and the higher level of fees.
Would there be other one-off funding streams that would be available to institutes of technology?
Well, obviously the capital expenditure that we would do, we have made an allocation towards for minor equipment and for refurbishment.
And all of those examples you gave, one that you left out would be revenue from intellectual property and spin-out companies. Wouldn't that be a revenue stream?
That could be, yeah.
That would be. And how does that work? Can you talk me through how that works in policy terms?
Sure.
So how is an Institute of Technology protected in terms of intellectual property? I know there's a national protocol, so you might just talk me through that first.
Well, clearly supporting innovation is very important for us, and that's something that we're trying to do overall. And we're seeking to encourage higher education institutions to engage in innovation. So one of the ideas, one of the concepts there is greater utilisation by enterprises of research assets of our higher education institutions, and by engaging enterprises with research centres and technology centres, and obviously translating intellectual property or new thinking into commercial products and services, and the role of higher education institutions in that.
And when there is, and there is then co-location of private companies in institutes of technology, isn't there? So there would be private companies that there would be an element of vulture funding. There would be maybe researchers or staff in WA in institutes who would be part of maybe those companies, and then there would be spin-out companies.
There can be different aspects of that. So, for example,
but there is that. I'm not saying
yes,
there could be. There is.
Yes.
Yeah.
But is. That might not be the only one. So, for example, many of our institutes of technology have technology centres which are part funded by Enterprise Ireland. They can have both spin-outs. They could have spin-outs in there, or they could have companies coming in which aren't actually spin-outs but coming in to link into the services there. So there can be different ways in which those technology centres, and we have a number of those. But
there would be spin-out companies then where you would have a combination of funding from vulture funds, and they then would have maybe an equity in the company. You would have people who are also either researchers or academics in institutes who would also be directors and shareholders, and then you would have the institute itself, which would be a shareholder. So what level of protections are there in place to make sure that the institute would be a fairly substantial shareholder? So if there is a spin-out and substantial revenue accruing, that the institute is protected and the institute gets its fair share.
Just to just correct, I don't think you did intentionally. What you meant venture capital, not vulture. I think venture funds.
Yeah.
Not vulture.
Yeah.
Vulture is a different concept.
Yeah. Matter of opinion.
Well, no. Well,
debate, you can get into his.
Okay. Well, I'm not trying to stick it into that.
Venture,
But there are venture capitalists and funders, especially in the spin-out area, which are different, I think, than the sort of other companies. But I'm not trying to enter into that.
And how are the institutes? How are
there are national codes in place, and they're established under the aegis of Enterprise Ireland. So there's an IP protocol policy document which sets out the framework underpinning research collaboration and access to IP from state-funded research, and there's an IP protocol guide which provides an overview of the national IP management guidelines and links to resources.
And I have all of that, but would you draw a distinction, Mr. O'Fallou, between researchers and, for example, people who would be heads of departments, or people who would have a governing role or a management role in institutes or universities, and maybe people who are in those positions having an interest in either being a director or a shareholder in these companies? Because obviously, if you were in a management position or an executive position, you have a function and a responsibility in relation to oversight. Yeah. So for example, in terms of protection of intellectual property, who in an institute would be, where would the buck stop in terms of responsibility?
Well, the buck stops on all of these issues in terms of governance.
We'll take an institute of technology. Where would the buck stop?
With the president's role to
with the president.
With
so
the president's role
I'll stop you there. So
reporting to the governing authority.
So with the president, so the buck would stop with the president.
The president is the accountable person in the institute to ensure that all the governance arrangements are.
And would it be unusual then? Would there be any instances where a president of an institute would also be a shareholder or a director in some of these companies?
We wouldn't have detail on the ownership of the individual companies.
Would you be aware of any situations where a president of an institute would be a director or a shareholder in research companies based in the very institution that they are responsible for governance for?
Again, that would depend on, I suppose, are you talking about a president having an ownership role in a company which was established while that person was president, or are you talking about present.
Could have been before this person was the president, but I'm saying if...
linking to a different...
Are you aware of... I'll make it very simple for you. Are you aware of any circumstances where we have co-location companies based in research and development institutes in any part of the country where the president of the same institute has a shareholding or is a director in some of these companies and multiple companies? Yeah. Would you be personally aware of any situations where that is the case?
I think you may be talking about WIT, and I just on WIT.
Well, I didn't mention. Yeah, I'm asking, are you aware of any circumstance?
I know that, but we aren't aware of the detailed arrangements for any companies. But we are aware of a particular case of a company that's no longer in WIT. So you asked about current companies that's no longer in WIT, that is in private ownership or has actually been sold. So where there is a particular issue, including going on. Could I just share? My brother is also a shareholder in the same company. He was also employed in WIT. He was a co-founder of the TSSG, the communications unit that spun out this company. He was a director of this company and was in the employment and had some ownership.
And I'm not referring at all to...
But I'm going to ask my colleague Christy Mannion to answer.
I'm not asking you to... I'm not asking you to respond to any of that. What I'm saying is that I'm trying to understand here where there are...
But if you asked me, was I aware of a case?
Yes.
And I'm about to talk... I am going to give you the case that we're aware of, but I'm not the one who's going to talk
before
about
you
it.
do that, before you do that, can I just put something to you? In response to a parliamentary question where you were asked about whether there was any conflicts of interest, and you talked about policies and procedures, you said, my officials have been made aware that there is an internal review underway in one institution with a view to confirming that the institution's interest has been appropriately represented and protected. Can you tell us what that institution is?
And that's why I'm referring you to Mr. Mannion.
Mr. Mannion will answer, and I can understand if you say there's a connection between yourself, it's probably more appropriate to stand back in fairness to
everybody. So I'll direct my questions to
But we're
Mr.
concluding
Mannion,
quickly on this point because
if I can come back later then, because I have other questions.
You certainly can, but we'll just... And this is the last point, Mr. Mannion, on this issue, and then I'm going on to Deputy Madigan.
Okay, well, in relation to the point that's raised there and in reference to the parliamentary question, there is an issue, and there is...
Which institution are we talking about?
Waterford we're talking about.
So this is the one that's under review?
Yes.
Who's carrying out this review?
It's carried out by the Financial Controller, I understand, on behalf of the Chair of the Governing Authority. And I understand that a report will go to the Governing Authority over the next week.
And what is the nature of this review? What's it looking at?
It's exactly what you referred to there. It's looking at to make sure that all the relevant policies, protocols and procedures have been complied with and statutory governance processes have been applied. So that's what it's going to say at that stage.
And would the Controller have been aware of, would you have any role in relation to oversight here as well, or auditing? Because if there was a payment made that flows from any of these spin-out companies to an institute, would that be included in their annual accounts? So would you have any role? And have you looked at this issue in general terms?
Well, I'm certainly aware of a disposal and receipts into the institute and how the receipts were applied. So it's certainly forming part of the current audit that's underway.
No, I'm going to move on. You'll have a further opportunity to come back. Deputy Madigan.